briefing. The briefing's going to take about 50 minutes, and we'll go into that. And then Greg Smith from Hobbs and Strauss is coming here too to just offer some viewpoints on our congressional visits and some suggestions. Hobbs and Strauss has agreed 3 years ago when John was elected president to take on the Native American Church in North America to represent us over here. And we're very happy for that. And he's going to join us, and then we're going to go into our distribution of the briefing papers and then our outlook, and then we'll break. And then tomorrow at 8:30 we convene again next door, Senate Dirksen, room 628. And this panel, the relatives are here, Avery and Wilson and Justin and Harry. They're going to be conducting that first panel. So we ask for your engagement, your respect. Have your breakfast. You could even bring it up there into the room. It's okay to eat in that room. We're going to have refreshments, and we're going to have catering at lunchtime. That's why we need everybody registered, so we can count how many lunches we need to add on or take away or so forth. But we're going to take care of you tomorrow in a good way like that. And that panel is really important. And what Brother Justin had expressed to me is that, we get up here on Capitol Hill, and the members of Congress and their staff, they don't really ever get to hear from ceremonial leaders or spiritual people, holy men, medicine men, and so forth. And even I'm sure our friend here from Veterans Services might attest too, it's even at the Traditional Healing Summit, it was real heavy on feds and their talking points and what they're trying to do. But tomorrow's another day I hope they get. Are you? I am too. Good, I'll sit by you. We'll encourage each other to say whatever's got to get said there. But what I'm trying to get at here is it's a unique opportunity, and the staff here can tell their colleagues too, that's going to kick off right at 9 o'clock. And they're going to take their time, how we talk and how we share. And it's going to be really, healthy for everybody to do that. And then we're going to get into some of the honorings, and we're going to get into some of the acknowledgments and the visitors that are coming, different members of Congress that are coming. There's a couple senators that are going to be there, and several House members are going to be there too. Betty McCollum too, the real key member on the Interior Appropriations Committee, is coming as well. And we're hoping for this program all day tomorrow. It's going to really be one thing after another. So you can take breaks, you can stretch your legs and come back in, but we ask that you stay with us all day on that. So that's some commentary that I wanted to provide. And there's the traditional state of our sacred ceremonies, medicine, sacred sites, and native languages 30 years after the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. And that's that first panel. And I wanted to read something, and there's some more staff came in. This is from the original 1978 American Indian Religious Freedom Act. It says, resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that henceforth it shall be the policy of the United States to protect and preserve for the American Indians their inherent right of freedom to believe, express, exercise their traditional religions of the American Indian, Eskimo, Aleut, Native Hawaiians, including but not limited to access of sacred sites, use of possession of sacred objects, and the freedom of worship through ceremonials and traditional rites. Something happened in these 40 plus years since that was signed, where people are scared on Capitol Hill to talk about American Indian religions and ceremonies and sacred places. And every time we do that, staff started explaining to us the Establishment Clause like we've never heard of it before. We want, most of all, our congressional staff to understand you have plenary power over Indian affairs. And this statute isn't a made-up piece of law. It exists. It's an existing legislative vehicle to fund the preservation of these ceremonial ways. Sometimes that means protection of a sacred site. Sometimes that means medicine acquisition, medicine security. Sometimes that means public-private partnerships with private landowners that happen to have highly sensitive battlefields on their land, sacred sites, medicines, things of that nature on their land. So this is where you're going to hear some of these expressions when this briefing starts, and we wanted to just kind of prime that up for you. It's all based on a legislative vehicle that exists already. And then in 1994, and some of the old timers are in here with us, still walking the halls of Congress, was a great movement because of a travesty that happened at the Supreme Court, which it basically outlawed American Indian religion. A particular ceremony was targeted, the peyote ceremony. And Congress did what Congress is supposed to do. They offered a legislative fix and circumvented a bad Supreme Court decision and exerted their plenary power over Indian affairs. It's with that spirit that we come here today, because we're in grave danger of losing where our medicine grows. And if that medicine grows only in one place in America, and it's all on private land, and we have to develop what this country's been doing forever, public-private partnerships to establish conservation easements on those private land and incentivize voluntarily to those landowners. This is the whole essence of it. To give you an analogy, the treaty tribes in the Northwest, salmon harvesting rights. And when they signed the Stevens Treaties of 1855, they talked about the settlers and the tribes would fish in common. And what the Supreme Court ruled was in common meant that the tribes were giving the settlers, European Americans, in common, something they never had. They were giving them in common meant half. They had 100% of the fishery. They were ceding that through treaty to the settlers, half of it. Fast forward 100 years, they're down to 1% of the population. They still have a right to half of the salmon. But what they found out was if they destroy the habitat, which is happening, if they destroy wild salmon runs, if they destroy the waters, if they allow all this clear cutting, what good is a treaty right if there's no salmon to harvest that's allowed in your treaty right? This statute here, preserve and protect, what good is this piece of paper if all of our medicine is gone, if it's paved over, if it's fenced off, if the wind farms, oil pads, urban development, and all of those things do that? And why we're here today is because there was a great awakening in Indian country. This administration took on the task of investigating, well, they did what they called the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative. And they worked for 2 years straight interviewing boarding school survivors. And we're going to talk about their recommendations and how it links to ceremonial needs in today's world, 2024. But they released 2 reports, volume 1 and 2, and their recommendations. Interestingly enough, you're going to hear from the panelists, these recommendations, they're already included in statute. So this is where we have to link with our congressional members and their staff. How do we execute a strategy to make real the promise of the American Indian Religious Act, Freedom Act? How do we make real the recommendations in the boarding school report that already have legislative statutes backing them? So it's in that spirit that I'm going to announce, and here in a minute, our first speaker. And this individual in our homelands where I reside on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, it's the Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara Nation. And he comes from the Arikara branch of that. And these are really a powerful tribe that once upon a time lived near the Gulf of Mexico, not far from where this peyote grows. And they migrated up north to where they found themselves now. And in this tribe, he's a ceremonial leader, even though he's a young man. In this tribe, the MHA Nation, he's looked to when children are born to help them along with a prayer, to marry people. At funerals, he's one of the first people that are asked to go conduct and facilitate those funerals, to offer those sacred burial rites that we have. And we're so lucky to have him that he threw his hat in the ring and said to his family, share me with the rest of Indian country for a few short years so that we can do something powerful here and help our medicine along. And with that respect, his tribe got behind him, his family got behind him, children, and all of us too. And he offered to make a way to have me help him as well. So that's why I'm here as a volunteer. And we're all volunteers. Want the relatives to know that too. But that's how much we love this way of life. So this individual, Ashu at Holy Rope, is our president of the Native American Church in North America. He won a landslide 3.5 years ago and then had to run for re-election, and it was such a good, wonderful job. The national delegates of our national body by acclamation voted him in again. So without further ado, it's time now for our congressional briefing, and our first speaker is John Brady. Give him a warm welcome, relatives.
First of all, I'd like to say a good day to each and every one of you, and thank the Creator, God, the Great Spirit here, for bringing us all together. I'm going to say to my older relatives, I want to say excuse me at this time for standing here talking, and I'm really thankful that we could all make that good advocating movement here, and to try to do our utmost humble best here for our way of life. I know it's been plenty of travels over here to express our concerns as Native American Church ceremonial practitioners. So before I go any further, most of all, I just want to thank my wife, my beautiful wife here, for supporting me and doing all and making me look good in a way that I could be more savvy the way I express myself, the way I make an appearance here for whatever occasion. I'm thankful for that. And most of all, my executive team, I want to thank them very much for doing their best that they can do in their duties and responsibilities. And most of all, our legislative chair, Mr. Ryan Wilson, and our legal team, our representative here, Mr. Justin Jones. And I'm really glad and really happy here that we have eyes and ears over here on Capitol Hill through Hobbs and Strauss. And also want to thank our tribal leadership here as well. I know we have some here, and we have some got a text here, some or have other prior engagements. So they'll be here when they can, and also some senators as well. I just want to thank them for giving us time, this opportunity here to express ourselves. And I want to thank those that had a helping hand to make us come to where we need to be, and our voices could be echoing through these Congress halls. So some way, somehow, maybe through our expressions, or maybe just being here, maybe it could tap into our senators and our congressional staff to some way, somehow, to look our way, to help us along in our everyday duties and responsibilities, because this American Indian Religious Freedom Act from 1978, was very helpful. We still stand by it. Along with the 1994 amendments, we still stand by it. But there is no enforcement. There is no enforcement in a way where it's being violated every day. We all know that. And to all of us in here that come from grassroots teachings and upbringings, we exercise our American Indian Religious Freedom Act every day. We get up when that sun gets up. We make a prayer. We make an offering. We do all these good things here because that's the way we were taught. That's the way we was raised. And I'm thankful and glad that we could be congregated over here at the Senate building in the halls of Congress. And I'm really glad and thankful to our state representative, Jalen, there for making this opportunity for us to express our concerns in a nice venue, in a nice vibes and nice feelings here. So it goes to show that we're getting somewhere. We're getting a little bit closer where we need to be. We're getting a little bit, we're heard. Everybody is here helping, whether it be through the Department of Justice or the Department of Interior, or USDA, the DEA. I know the DEA here was going to be here shortly, and Department of Justice as well. So I just want to thank everyone. I'm so glad and so happy. I could go on, but there's so much I want to say and so little time, because I'm on a shot clock here. We get like 7-8 minutes, but nevertheless, I don't want to take away from my rest of my my officers here, because they have some good stories too as well that they want to share. Not only stories, but suggestions and recommendations, how this law that we're governed by, how we can shine light on it some more. So I'm going to go kind of into my report here, what I have to say. So I would like to thank the congressional leaders and staff for taking time away from your busy schedules to hear us. I would like to thank our North Dakota state senators and representatives for being our voice and hearing us as our 5 Native tribes in North Dakota. Today, we as Native American Church of North America have concerns and worries with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978 and 1994, the amendments that we are covered under through our ways of life, that they have no oversight. There hasn't been a review since 1994 amendments. We are here to celebrate our 30 years of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, amendments of 1994. It's been 30 years. The Native American Church of North America, I'm thankful that we're hosting this summit here on Capitol Hill. A call to convene our tribal leaders, our stakeholders, our ceremonial practitioners to celebrate this law and advocate some more. We're thankful to the National Congress of American Indians as a co-host. We are thankful to have these federal laws. We stand by them. And we're advocating here today because there's no enforcement on this law. We are here today reminding the government to uphold to their federal trust responsibilities. What we have to say, and we encourage the federal government to help us, please. There are over 350,000 plus membership throughout the nation of this land. We're also here for our ceremonial practitioners and all our ceremonial ways of life. We still have to educate of who we are. We still have to tell our stories, and we still have to get permission to pray. We have been having our ceremonial prayer here annually on Capitol Hill since 2021 at the Potomac Park. We also need a permission to do that through the National Park Service. And also, mind you, we need a fire permit. We are here today to express our concerns. We need your help. We need your blessing to take on what we're asking for, and take time to read over our documents, our materials we brought here today. We have our tribal government support to get our efforts and goals across the finish line. National Congress of American Indians have resolutions and support since 2009 in supporting our advocating efforts. We have testified in the United States House of Representatives Appropriations Committee since 2021, since 2025, through the appropriation budgets. We met with the White House staff, the policy advisors. We also have executive order proposed, a draft to the President Biden, where we were encouraged to do this because of them. They mentioned that rather us do it, we don't live that every day. So rather than them do it, they turned it over to us. So here we are today. This past 2 years, we've been advocating. Imagine writing an executive order to the President Biden. We kind of brought him to our level as well. grassroots teachings, upbringings. We shared our ideas, our plans. We put everything in there that would help all our Native people throughout the North, the West, the East, and South. We also shared our plans with the Texas landowners. We had field hearings where our Natural Resource Subcommittee, Indigenous People of the United States, came to Oklahoma and heard all our uncles and our Native American church family. They shared their stories and concerns because, why Oklahoma? Because this is the birthplace with all these fireplaces, where all these prayers, the birth of a prayer started years ago. From then on, they had to get chartered with the state of Oklahoma. They had articles of incorporation and all these bylaws to stay in tune of society today. We met with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Senate Committee of Indian Affairs, just to name a few of the tribal entities. I just want to share that. We have letters. We sent plenty of letters to the federal government, the programs. We did everything that we can do. We did our homework. We're not just here shooting from the hip. We're here because of our ancestors' prayers, our relatives' prayers. So we also have the Hobbs & our legal firm, helping and guiding us along with the Native American Church, NACNA legal team, Mr. Justin Jones. These past 3 years, the Native American Church of North America been boots on the ground, working and reading on all the laws and policies the federal government had put in front of us. Our advocating efforts are to advance our policies, our conservation, purity, habitat demonstration project to get to the congressional support that we need today for a positive impact for our future and our way of life. Our children and our grandchildren of Native American church family will be safe and not have to worry. We have teachings and prayers as Native American church families. We think about others before ourselves. We want our future for our way of life to be protected and secured. We have some ideas, we have some recommendations, and we have some reminders. This Luphophorhia woolly MCI, science calls it. DEA calls it Schedule 1 controlled substance. Restaurant education calls it peyote. But we as Native people of this land call it our holy, sacred, divine medicine. Every tribe has a unique way of saying how wonderful this medicine is for us. Because of the sacred content of it, we have a holistic way of thinking, talking, looking, and praying, singing about all these things. That is why today we're advocating for legislation to protect and reinforce the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. So I got the cue. I want to just say about that much right about now. I could go on and on, my good relatives. So thank you for hearing. God bless.
I don't like being the bad guy, but we're going to give him the cue sometimes and keep it going. I want to recognize my little brother, Wheezy Little Elk. He's the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs. He's over in the corner there. He joined us from Interior, and he's joined us. Yeah, give him a welcome as well. And then Naomi Miguel from the White House Initiative on Indian Education and Tribal Colleges. And there's probably a longer title than that. I got the core of it, but Naomi has done an awesome job, and both of them have worked on diligently on Native languages and the 10-year Native language plan. But give them both a round of applause. They've joined us as well. So I like that. And then there's some new staff that came in as well. We have a rep here from the Department of Justice joined us. Darren Carrillo sent over, and also some more staff joined in. So we'll get your introductions in a little bit. But without further ado, we're going to keep it going here. The next panelist is Daryl Red Cloud. He comes to us from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, the Oglala, Lakota. And Darrell is a professor in Lakota studies at Oglala Lakota College. And many of you in the room remember the old days when Navajo Community College was started. You started the tribal college movement. Right behind Navajo Community College was the Oglala Sioux tribe. And he's a living manifestation of the brilliance of the tribal college movement. And he's come here from the famed Red Cloud family. His great-great-grandfather came here in Washington many times. So if you, some of you had plane connections and delays and cancellations, they used to come in horse and wagon by train. Then it was Model Ts. And then one day, eventually, we got airplanes to bring us over here. But this is what he comes from. So we're going to turn it over to him. And again, he'll be giving remarks. And it'll be about 8 minutes, Uncle. And we'll give him a warm welcome, relatives, as he joins us here.
I want to say good day to everybody today. And I'm thankful for each and every one of you. You made your way over here and you're representing yourself, your peoples, the people you work for, and so forth. I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. Like Ryan said, my name is Daryl Red Cloud. I am a fifth blood descendant of Chief Red Cloud of the Oglala Lakota people. I come here on behalf of my grandchildren, the future generation of our people, all indigenous people, trying to make a way, trying to say something on their behalf, so that our way of life can continue on in this country. I'm here on behalf of the Native American Church of North America and all Native people of this country. Today, indigenous people are facing the destruction of natural habitats when it comes to our medicines and our sacred sites. The development of natural energy resources is destroying the land where our natural medicines, our peyote, natural lands of our sacred sites, and where we utilize to practice our way of life. The development of natural energy resources is just destroying the land where peyote grows. We need to strengthen the American Indian Religious Freedom Act to protect the land where the peyote grows and other natural medicines, as well as our sacred sites throughout this land. We're asking you and the United States government to fulfill the government's trust obligation to the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Using the authorization to protect the indigenous way of life is not just a way to help the Native people, but it is the right thing to do. Our entire effort to date has been to link the policy declaration contained within the American Indian Religious Freedom Act of 1978 to preserve and to protect American Indian religions, ceremonies, traditional ways of life, contemporary spiritual practices. We have the need to protect the peyote in its natural habitat, ensuring its availability so that there will always be a peyote ceremony in place for our spiritual way of life and our future generations. We have offered Congress recommendations and White House recommendations on how they can better fulfill their trust obligations to the Indian country regarding the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. For the Native American Church of North America, we are trying to provide a legislative vehicle that links the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative Investigative Report, Volume 2, recommends recommendations for community healing, cultural revitalization, strengthening tribal identity to our policy priorities. For example, the investment in enforcing the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, developing conversation strategies must be consistent with the documented destruction of tribal identity and forced assimilation. We need to bring it together. We need to build something for the future generations. Acknowledge what happened in a good way and move forward and try to bring things together the way it should be. We are trying to capture a confluence of events, the boarding school investigative report, Native American Heritage Month, American Indian Religious Freedom Act anniversary, and a new Congress along with the new leadership in this country. Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative investigative report. In there, it states things that are similar to what I'm going to say. The United States has an obligation to correct and heal the wrongs wrought by the federal boarding school system because those wrongs continue to harm Indian tribes today. Believe it or not, on our reservations, those things are still happening. If we could come together, then things can be better for our indigenous people of this country. Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, Newland, provides 8 recommendations as part of Volume 2 in the Boarding School Initiative Report for meaningful actions that the U.S. government may undertake to correct and heal those wrongs. The United States should accompany these acknowledgments with a formal apology to individual families and Native peoples throughout this country. These tribes were harmed by the U.S. policy. In addition, the United States could normally repudiate forced assimilation of American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Native Hawaiian people as a national policy, and affirm that it is the policy of the United States to ensure that American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiian people have the right to maintain their unique cultural identity and languages. Such a statement should be issued through the appropriate means of officials to demonstrate that it is made on behalf of the people of the United States and be accompanied by bold and actionable policies. I just want to say that it is very important that we preserve our way of life. This medicine is very important to us. It has a lot of positive healing stories amongst our people, all different people that use this medicine amongst the Native people. It is something that our people, our ancestors of long ago stood up for and did their best to protect and preserve. Our future generations today, they need that healing because of the intergenerational traumas that stemmed from those things that happened way back when. Today, our people are still healing from those things. And this Native American church peyote way of life is one of the greatest things for that healing. Thank you all very much for listening to me. I appreciate it.
So we're gonna go all the way from Pine Ridge, all the way over to Oneida country, Wisconsin. And they have a beautiful story, part of the Haudenosaunee and the Iroquois Nation, and they migrated their way out to Wisconsin. And years ago, Lakota people transferred and gifted this way of life to a family there that had spread throughout the whole tribe now, this way of life. And our niece and the secretary of NACNA, but also a language activist, a language advocate, the one that is reviving the Oneida language within their community there in Oneida, Wisconsin. We're so very proud of her. So she's going to talk about that link with the Native language revitalization, the recommendations in the report, and she has some other expressions as well. So give Jessica Paulus a warm welcome here, and we turn it over to her at this time.
Galis wagwag yung nadagwas niyong gets. Lagwaho ni wagito loda ni o te aga ni I o kale tolokoane ni tahwain o kale Haudenosaunee ni. So I wanted to greet everybody here in my language, and my Ungwaihoe name is Yinla Douglas. It means she takes a step up. I'm from the Wolf Clan, from the Oneida people of the Standing Stone, from the people of the Longhouse. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here and participating and actively standing up for our medicine that we have here, the commonality that we share of spiritual belief. And so I would just want to say thank you for that. What I want to talk about is cultural community and individual healing and how it relates to the American American Indian Religious Freedom Act. So Native American cultural community and individual healing are deeply interconnected, often grounded in traditional spiritual practices. These practices are not only a source of cultural identity, but they're also pathways of emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental well-being. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act underscores the importance of protecting the rights that we have as Native Americans to practice our traditional belief systems. It also is including the access to sacred sites and use of ceremonial objects and freedom to conduct spiritual practices. By affirming these rights, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act enables individuals and communities to engage in healing practices. These practices are integral to personal and collective recovery, resilience, and well-being. The connection highlights the essential role of cultural and spiritual freedom in fostering holistic health within our Native American communities. Promoting cultural identity not only empowers individuals but strengthens communities, creating environments where traditional practices create safe spaces. They also foster traditional values such as respect, harmony, and interconnectedness, and they thrive within that environment. Ultimately, they contribute to the prevention of violence. They also promote spiritual and cultural healing as a community and individuals. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act safeguards the rights of communities to engage in spiritual and cultural practices where it's critical for addressing the root causes of violence and promote the healing of trauma, both individually and as Native American communities. By preserving access to sacred sites, ceremonial practices, spiritual traditions, and our traditional medicines, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act supports holistic approaches to community well-being, which in turn prevents violence and heals trauma within our communities. When cultural identity is maintained and it's celebrated through traditional practices, languages, and spiritual ceremonies, it fosters a sense of pride and belonging within our communities and individuals, particularly our youth. Cultural connections, they act as a protective factor, reducing the risk of violence and addressing underlying issues with historical trauma, marginalization, and the loss of identity. The revitalization of Native American languages is also extremely important in promoting and supporting our traditional ways of life. The revitalization of Native American languages is deeply connected to cultural and spiritual practices, as the language often carries a sacred knowledge that we don't often get with the use of English. It holds our prayers, our ceremonies, and is central to our belief systems. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act protects the rights of Native Americans, which is frequently expressed and sustained through Native languages. By supporting language revitalization, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act indirectly strengthens the preservation and practice of these spiritual traditions, ensuring that ceremonies, oral histories, traditions, and cultural teachings, many of which are language dependent, can be passed down to future generations. The connection highlights the vital role of language in maintaining the spiritual and cultural freedoms affirmed by the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Thank you.
Our next panelist and presenter comes to us from New Mexico and the Four Corners area relatives, and he's also a veteran, United States Marine Corps. And we have had our veteran over here too. He mentioned he's on the TAC, Tribal Advisory Committee. And I want to express as well that in our veterans, we were able to honor Peter McDonald a few weeks ago at National Congress of American Indians. But they, as you all know, as we know, but I'm reiterating it for the staff, they served at a higher rate than any other group of people in this country and received more merits and acknowledgments than any other people in this country. But with the code talkers, what was interesting when they used to help us come up here on the native language bills is that they were asked to use the language as a weapon against our enemies of the United States. And they asked that they use this language to uplift the flag. And this is what we're asking, is that this flag can continue to uplift the languages, but also what we need to preserve and protect American Indian religions. And Terry, my colleague, my brother, he exemplifies that very, very well. And so we're so very proud to have him come here. And he's our editor-in-chief and our organizer and our great champion here, the Native American Church in North America. So give him a good warm welcome.
Yat wegi tlasit lengi ado wegi kad hoslaido ahe ut anin shliro asmat so bashin tachi ni das chelo na koidene das nade khote asharo isya hol so holiede ade ejishin ke. Thank you for having me to speak today. I'm from Shiprock, New Mexico. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I serve as the editor-in-chief for the Native American Church of North America. I have been a lifetime member of the Native American Church and have been an active member of the Native American Church of New Mexico since its founding over 40 years ago. Thank you to the Senate Majority Leader, Schumer, for his leadership in Congress, for sponsoring this room. Congratulations to Senator Tone as the majority leader in the next Congress. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act and the Department of Interior Boarding School Investigative Report intersect in their efforts to address the historical injustice faced by Native American communities. I'm going to repeat that because it's important. The American Indian Religious Freedom Act and the Department of Interior Boarding School Investigative Report intersect in their efforts to address the historical injustices faced by Native American communities. Historically, Native American culture and religious practices were disrespected and outlawed by the federal government, resulting in Native Americans being prosecuted for practicing their religious beliefs. In 1978, after Congress determined that Native American culture and religion was endangered by federal policies, Congress enacted the American Indian Religious Freedom Act to initiate policy to protect the rights of Native Americans to practice their religions freely. So relatives, what I just said there about the injustices to tribal communities is one reason the Native Americans needed to be protected. And that's why Congress enacted the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Likewise, the discovery of 215 unmarked graves at a boarding school in Canada prompt the federal government to reflect on past federal policies to culturally assimilate Native Americans in the United States. The Department of Interior undertook the investigation of the loss of human life and the lasting consequences of federal Indian boarding schools. The findings of this investigative report confirmed the federal government directly targeted Native American children in the pursuit of cultural assimilation that coincided with Indian territorial dispossession. Again, relatives, I just described the injustice that was happening on tribal communities and why, and the reason, that was the reason why the investigative report was prompt. Finally, the recommendations in the investigative report, such as supporting the revitalization of Native languages and cultural practices, directly linked to the goals of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act to protect the free exercise of Native religions and cultural practices. Also, the report's call for a formal acknowledgement and apology from the federal government aligns with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, recognition of past violations of Native American religious rights. In conclusion, the investigative report shed new light on the need to modernize the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. Despite the law, Native Americans continue to face challenges in protecting their religious practices, including medicine security, by preserving peyote access and long-term viability. Both the American Indian Religious Freedom Act and the investigative report promote healing and cultural revitalization. To begin the pursuit of cultural revitalization, the investigative report recommends the federal government could invest in healing from the impacts of the forced assimilation on a scale that is at minimum commensurate with the investments made in the federal Indian boarding school system between 1871 and 1969. Relatives, ladies and gentlemen, that equates to today's dollars of about $23 billion. That's how much it was invested in this system. Likewise, the federal government could invest in the American Indian Religious Freedom Act to safeguard medicine security, again, by preserving peyote access and viability. I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Terry. And we move on over to Shanto, Arizona. And Elroy Watson has been on our board for several terms, and he's served in several different positions on the executive board, but he's bringing a special message today. He's our treasurer, and he helped us get together the little refreshments and stuff over there. And for you staff, we're not trying to starve you. Tomorrow we're having a full lunch also if you got any time to come over, but he's been a champion of what we're trying to do and of the Native American Church. And we want him to have a nice warm welcome as he comes to the podium here. Elroy Watson, Dene Nation, Navajo Nation.
Yate shekasi. Kwai asha itzagi sa ashkana ha khihidini. Yate shike shilek adon nenshe. not Oneida suggest, what did you need to chase? It's not national. But I said, case you don't know, we shot what in Hania, yard a kegit out. She must not national doshik. No, but it's chindo, yo yeshan that. But she didn't not what I said, Yasha that. Okay, yard relatives. My name is Elroy Watson, and I just want to do a little advertisement to the food. We please take it, eat it, consume it today and tomorrow, because I hate to throw good money away. So please, I hope the monitor allows me just 1 minute to do this advertisement so he doesn't cut my time short. I grew up on a Navajo reservation called Shanto, Arizona, from 1971 to 1980. I went to boarding school there. And my experience was, I don't know if you remember Mondays. Mondays was church day. How many remember that? Church day, Mondays. People come on campus, all these preachers, right? So I'm a young kid, right? I'm waiting for the Native American church, my church leader to come come in and preach about the peyote way, but never showed up. Always wondered why. Why is it okay for somebody to show up and preach the Christianity, but I couldn't, because in the fireplace we talked about God, we talked about Jesus, talked about the NACNA. We talked about those things, but that didn't happen. It only happened one night out of the week. And it was very unfortunate for me. I felt very lost and forgotten. But what I wanted you to remember is that a few years ago we made an appeal to a department. And what they said is we cannot meet that criteria. And we said, why? Why can't you ask us, all we're asking to do is do root plow. Protect that. Protect the peyote as it was given to us by the holy people. And what they said to us was, it's establishment clause. And I'm like, what? Establishment clause? The government can't make laws, religious laws. And I'm like, I'm dumbfounded. So we're flying back, my wife and I. So here's a shout out to my wife. I love you, my dear, my wife. Thank you for allowing me and supporting me to be here, to spend some time with my relatives here. And my kids, thank you. So we're flying back. I'm thinking, what about those Monday churches? Was I not in a government-funded school, owned building, but I was exposed to it? How many of my relatives have had that experience? Why? So that totally didn't buy into it. And I gave it a good, awful name for it. So peyote grows in 4 counties in Texas, right, Mr. Patchen? And it's Starr County, Hawk County, Zapata, and Webb County. Those are the only places. And here's the unique things. Every tribe grows. They grow in different areas of parts of the United States. They tried to put them all in Oklahoma. That didn't work. So we went back to our reservation, like the Navajo reservation, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. So the peyote is the same way. They only grow in certain terrain, certain soil, atmospheric pressure. They had that nature in that area. It takes care, it coddles them, and matures them. And so when we harvest them, we harvest them mature. And we gave our sacred offerings to it. But the government said, that's a drug, that's class 1 drug. So I'm like, no, it's not. Maybe to you it is, but how can you justify and name a natural plant in its natural homeland? How do you do that? How do you tell? It's just like people say, Christopher Columbus discovered the Indians. No, we didn't discover the Indians. We were already here. Something's wrong with that picture. Why do we accept that? So we really cherish this peyote that we have because we use our language. As I introduced myself, that was my sovereign language. That was exercise my sovereignty. So when we make our pilgrimages, my brother, my chase right there, my uncle right there, they use their language. They say, they give it the name, we use that name. And that's how we make the offering. we're very careful in how we do it. And our ways that was handed down by our grandpas, our grandmas, the leaders in our homes from our homeland. So these church-operated schools is very difficult to accept because while our people, the Cherokees, the Comanches, the Choctaws, most notably the code talkers, they were dying, bleeding in foreign soil in protection of this country. And the boarding schools said no to their language. How is that the same? Why is it we're settling for what is thought to be best for us? And why do we have to succumb to that and say, oh no, the disparity is still here today? And my encouragement to everyone in this room, treaty obligation can only be protected by language and culture. We're asking for partnership. We're asking for financial aid against the profiting pharmaceuticals, the movement that will destroy the very existence of Native American people. Help us to preserve, help us to perpetuate our youth so that someday my grandchildren can stand in this hall and say, hey, I was in the Kennedy caucus room addressing the Navajo Nation and the Congressional representative of this great country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elroy. Awesome words. And we're going to conclude with our cleanup hitter. And he's comes to us from the great Navajo Nation, too. And we're going to even out the tribal representation tomorrow a little bit. We have a lot of Oklahoma folks that are going to be on our panel. But this individual is our legal counsel. Not only that, though, he's a ceremonial leader within his representative community. And he has a very special message for us as well. And we're so very proud to work with Justin Jones. And I want to make note, too, and this isn't to keep bringing it up, but when you have great people that love each other, it makes us all pull for each other, and they recruit great people. They make great people want to come and volunteer and join in and do that. And the atmosphere with the leadership of NACNA's opened up pathways for people like Justin to come and join us like that. So I want to say that in a good way, brother. Aho for your presence, and aho for all that you bring to NACNA and the movement, what we're trying to accomplish here. Good relatives, give him a good warm welcome, Justin Jones.
Yat e anosco. Edo shitana edo araquasit ligi tenani tlinigi in this great meeting room, the Kennedy Caucus Room. What a place to meet. Yat e hidini do lis. I greet my Navajo, the relatives that are here, the leaders that are here, and I also want to bring a good, warm feeling to all the other relatives that are here that came from afar. Good to see you. Some I haven't seen since the convention during the summer, and I'm really glad that we could all convene here for a very, very good purpose. And I want to acknowledge the leadership here as well, the Senate, the United States Senate, the Majority Leader's Office, Senator Schumer, and I would call it a good gesture of respect that has been given to us, Native American Church of North America, to have been given this room this afternoon to talk about some very important things this afternoon. So a shahat to Senator Schumer's office and the Senate. And I also look forward to working with the incoming Majority Leader as well, Senator John Thune from the great state of South Dakota. One of the unique things about us Native Americans, indigenous, however way you want to term us, is the fact that we have always been nonpartisan. The nonpartisanship is deeply embedded in our language, in our prayers, in our songs, and in our ceremonies. Because guess what? We use both colors. We use the red color and we use the blue color. And we use that in our prayer robes, in things that we use to pray. Because it represents something that's very dear to us, very sacred to us. The red color has so many stories. The blue color has so many stories, equal in our belief system. And guess what? If you put red and blue together, what do you have? Purple. Purple is healing to us. So these colors are very unique in one way or another. So thereby it is embedded in us that we're nonpartisan. So in reality, in so many ways, it doesn't matter whether Democrats or Republicans become the majority here in this city that I am talking in. We present the same problem. We present the same issue. We don't present Democratic issues. We don't present Republican issues. We present issues that are dear to us, Native people. That's why we come to town here in Washington, D.C. to bring that. So I wanted to make that mention of partisanship. We don't have that. If we should have a color in one way or another to exemplify the Native American church, we could say we have the color green, because green is the color of our sacred medicine, peyote, because green is healing to us as well. I wanted to present my thoughts and my perspectives on certain things this afternoon here to take you back about 404 years ago in December of 1620. There was a boat full of people that were running from religious persecution that sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. It was in December. They didn't know where they were going, but they didn't want to die because the King of England said that this is the only religion of this country, and they were not part of that religion. And so they landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And Lord and behold, they were hungry. They were cold. They were sick. They were lost. The people at the time could have easily said, because of our cultural rules, because of our cultural laws, they are not of us, they are invaders, they are foreigners. Let's annihilate them. They don't belong here. But that's not who we are. Our cultural teachings tells us, if you see somebody all down and out, wanting some help, perhaps you could sidestep some of these things and tend to them. And that's what they did. That's what they did. So thereafter, they survived that first winter. And we're going to celebrate that next week. We call it Thanksgiving. And so we're going to celebrate that. After we got them all full and kind of overweight and kind of gave them some of our medicines, who knows, we might have given them some peyote at the time. And they became okay. But the point being is that they were fleeing from religious persecution. Somebody was telling them, do not pray like that. Do not sing like that. You are not allowed to pray and sing like that, or practice whatever that you practice that you have there. That's what they were being told. So when they became okay, they wanted to organize themselves. They wanted to govern themselves. They couldn't necessarily use their Bible or whatever good book or whatever teachings that they had to organize themselves. They had to come back to us again, Native people, and to say, how do you govern yourselves? How do you keep peace among yourselves? How do you take care of yourselves? And all of these forefathers, they have statues here all along this town here. They made their journey north of here to the Haudenosaunee people. They observed their ceremonies. They observed how they governed themselves in their longhouse ways. And they saw how they did. And perhaps, like we usually do, if we want to learn something or if we want to take something, we give him an offering. Say, hey, I'll give you 5 horses for that. I'll trade you some buffalo robes. That's where the theft began. They recorded it, and they brought it back to this town, and we went south of here at Philadelphia. That's when they drafted the United States Constitution. That's what that United States Constitution, which is just a little ways from here, that document, created the 3-branch government. Guess what? They left out the most important part of that branch that the Haudenosaunee people, us Native people, live by. It was prayer. It was our ceremonies. It's prayer and ceremonies that hold everything together for us. It holds the government together. It holds families together. It brings healing and dispute resolution for us. That is the essence of who we are. Our ceremonies and our prayers and our songs does that. But this government left it out intentionally, thinking that somewhere down the line over here, we don't want to get into the same predicament of maybe the government telling us and persecuting us again. To me, as a Native, that was the greatest mistake that they made. Because without that, there's no peace. So today, that's what we have here in this town, 3-branch government. And so, think about this. The same thing that they were persecuted for is religion. They took that out so they will never do that again. But guess what? The same doctrines, the same strategies that they were persecuted upon, they used that on us. They didn't have enough land. They didn't have enough. So the westward expansion began. And that's how the Indian was in the way. The very person that gave him food, the very person that gave him water and gave him medicine when they were hungry and sick, they went after them. And so today, we're dealing with that trauma today. And if you were to think like a Native American, like my grandfather sitting back here, there's a Navajo word, or words for it. That's probably what he would say. And so today,
The boarding school experience is just one example of many of these traumas that we're facing today. Let me tell you about my great boarding school experience. Rock Point Boarding School in Rock Point, Arizona. On a Wednesday at school they would ask us, okay, we're going to have Religious Day today, 3:30 after school. Go to dorm 2. Then they give you a piece of paper. It says Protestant, Catholic, Mormon, and Lutheran. They didn't find Native American church or Indian traditional ceremonies. They didn't have a box for that. So me and my buddies and my relatives at the time say, okay, boys, which one do you want to go to? Let's go to the Mormons. Why? Because they have the best cookies and punch on Wednesdays, and because they have the best gifts during Christmas time. That was what we picked our religion up. But try to do that today in any public school across the United States of America. Imagine that. You would have a firestorm, but that's what boarding school was all about. So today, that is only one example. And today, that is what we're dealing with. Now, think about it this way. Yes, there is this boarding school studies that were done, the report came out, and the recommendations that are here. Okay, the recommendation is we got to have language preservation. We got to have culture preservation. We got to have traditional knowledge preservation. Guess what? They left it out again. What are you afraid of? What are you scared about? You left out the most important part again. You left out ceremonies. You left out religion in your recommendation. Maybe you waited for Native American Church of North America to come to town and say it for you. But here it is. You left it out. Prayer, song, and ceremony is vital to healing our nations today. The trauma that has been imposed upon us, that has caused, just like my brother here pointed it out, $25 billion worth of damage in the courtroom today. That's what would be assessed by a court of law. That's even a drop in the bucket now. So we are advocating, we need the peyote. We need the Native American church ceremonies. We need our sacred sites. We need our ceremonies. We need our language. We need all of these things so that not just to have you assist us, but we're going to do it ourselves this time. We're going to help ourselves, but you have a liability as a government. You have a tremendous liability right now in either to invest in that, our language, our ceremonies, to invest and to protect it as well, so that this healing can begin, that we can undergo our healing process. We have several generations to go, and we have only begun. And so that's what the Native American Church of North America sincerely, intimately, and seriously stands by, is for the healing of the Indian nations across this country of ours. Ladies and gentlemen, and my relatives that are here, thank you for listening, and I hope that I was able to invigorate and stimulate your thinking process this afternoon.
We thank you there, Justin, and I want to have Wheezy come up, and I want to acknowledge Christopher Cheney as well. If you want to stand up and just wave. He's over here. He's the Deputy Director of the United States Department of Justice, Office of Tribal Justice. And a little brother, you can come up and express yourself here. He's about 20 years ago, I was lecturing at U of A, and he was in law school over there then. And it's really awesome when you're seeing students come up, and then all of a sudden you blink, and he's a Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, and the mastermind behind the Living Languages program, which has given out over $23 million now towards language revitalization out of Interior. But we've been working with him, and he's been working with us, and even though time is getting short, he showed up here to express himself, and we want to have him come up here to the mic. So give him a warm welcome as well. We sure appreciate it.
Hamitake pio chute wasura pe chuzapalo. Wizipre machapalo na sichagola kote macha ashke gluipi tioshpai mataha. Good afternoon. I greet each and every one of you with a good heart. My name is Wizip Khanlalong Garriott. I serve as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs at the U.S. Department of the Interior. I am a citizen of the Sichagu Lakota Oyate. Our colonized name is Rosebud Sioux Tribe, and I come from the wrapped hair band of our people. I was sitting back there listening to all the speakers, and it made me feel a little bit nostalgic and a little bit sad, because it reminded me of my Huka father, my adopted father, Indian way. And he was a medicine man, and we were at Sundance, and we were doing things, and he called me over, and he said, let's go to the tree and pray. And so we went to the Sundance tree, and he pulled out a peyote button, and he said his father was Hunkad as brothers to Crow Dog's father. And so he always called him Crow Dog Dad, and he said Ate Crow Dog gave this to me and told me to pray with it, and so we went to the tree, and he prayed with that, and I remember it wasn't his way, but he understood and respected it as medicine, and Lekshi, Uncle Crow Dog, I grew up just exactly 2 miles from Paradise, Crow Dog's Paradise. So talking to Uncle one time, he said your great grandfather and my dad used to sweat together. He said this was way long time ago, and he'd say when they get sweat ready, he'd yell, and it would carry through the canyon, and then he'd know, and then 30 minutes later he'd show up, and then when my great grandfather would have sweat, he'd yell, and then 30 minutes later, then Henry would show up for sweat. So that's kind of how I grew up, and understanding that everything begins and ends with prayer, and that is so core and foundational to who we are as Indigenous people, and that that understanding is that we are not humans on a spiritual journey, but that we're spirits on a human journey while we're here for a limited time. It's an honor to be here, to share a little bit about our work, and where I think some of the connections and points of bringing everything together are. I think one of the core foundations is of as Indigenous people, using our Indigenous knowledge, is that we know that everything is connected. That you can't move one part of the spider web without it reverberating on another part of the spider web. And because of that, everything is all together. So you can't talk about, and native language revitalization, we're talking about food. And you can't talk about food without talking about prayer. And you can't talk about prayer without talking about sacred sites. And you can't talk about sacred sites without talking about our medicines. And you can't talk about our medicines without talking about our language. And so on and so forth. They're all interwoven together. They're braided together. And some of those strands within the carpet, some of those strands within the braid include, from a Western standpoint and from a legal standpoint, NAGPRA, and Native American Graves and Repatriation Act, and that is something that we've revised our regulations in 2023 for NAGPRA. And so some of those changes, which I think it takes a while for these things to trickle out. But one of them is deferring to indigenous knowledge in the repatriation process. So that means that we have to defer to what indigenous people say is knowledge, what they say is the right way to do things. It requires museums and federal agencies to obtain consent from descendants, from tribes, from NHOs for any activities that involve human remains. And it also imposes a 5-year deadline for museums and federal agencies to update their inventories. I'm sure many of you know, but I think it's still surprising the number of human remains that are still within agencies and under federal control, thousands. And so there's still a lot of work to do there. In 2022, President Biden signed the STOP Act, which prevents the international export of cultural items and prohibits from tracking under NAGPRA and the 1979 Archaeological Resources Protection Act. What the STOP Act does is it better regulates the export of tribal cultural items, facilitates voluntary repatriation of human remains, and it creates and operates a program for carrying out the core functions and operational requirements of the law's intent. And so we've been very focused over the last several years on developing and implementing the STOP Act because it's one of those pieces along this larger journey. We've also done a lot of work in the area around sacred sites. And I think that's something that we can do a lot more in. I think particularly when we think about thinking about sacred sites as not just an area where, what a lot of people might think about typically is, that's a mountain and we would go and do vision quest on that mountain. And it's a part of our traditional stories, but also thinking about sacred sites as areas where we go and harvest our medicines, because for some of our medicines, they only grow in certain areas. You can only get them at certain times of the year. Sometimes they only grow every few years. And so thinking about sacred sites from that perspective, I think is really important. That's been a part of what we call our Tribal Homelands Initiative, where we've really focused on co-stewardship, which is this idea that, one, it's a recognition that all land was at one point indigenous land. Many of our public lands were still within treaty territories, and that for thousands of years, indigenous people have taken care of those lands and did a pretty good job for thousands of years and hold special knowledge about how to caretake and how to take care of those lands, and that we should be putting and asking Native people to come back and take care of those lands, because it's something that's not only good for Native people and good for the land, but it's good for everybody. So that's been a part of our co-stewardship work. And there's been all kinds of examples around what that looks like and what it can look like. So for example, Bears Ears National Monument was one kind of big public example of what co-stewardship can look like. But there are literally hundreds of examples of these kinds of co-stewardship agreements that the federal government has signed, both at Interior, with Fish and Wildlife Service, with National Park Service, with the Bureau of Land Management, as well as the U.S. Forest Service at USDA. And so it's something that's been around for a long time, but we're finally starting to, it's been around since the Bush administration. It's been this administration that has really tried to push it though, using those existing frameworks.
And then finally, we've really started the process of thinking about how to incorporate indigenous knowledge into our work and how we do our work. And near the beginning of the administration, a memo was issued by the White House directing federal agencies to place indigenous knowledge at the same level as Western science, and how and to take that into account in our land management decisions. From there, the department pulled together what we call step-down guidance in terms of how we are going to implement that at our agency. And then, we're currently in the process of developing and releasing a handbook in terms of how to actually do that at the agency level, right? And so it's still an area that's being developed, but I think over the next decade, being able to bring indigenous knowledge into our land management decisions is going to be critically important. And quite frankly, if we're going to continue to have conservation lands and places where wildlife can thrive, where we can hunt, where we can gather our medicines, it's going to take indigenous knowledge and the incorporation of indigenous knowledge into that. Those are just a few of the areas. There was a lot of discussion also around the boarding school report. We issued 2 reports, Volume 1 and then Volume 2. We then went on a listening tour where we visited communities in all 12 of the BIA regions, and that work is still going on through our partnership with the Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. And of course, the president issued an apology recently for that destructive and shameful history of boarding schools. And when we think about our journey as indigenous people, first, I think it started with the land. Colonizers wanted the land. Depending on where you're at, each tribe has its own culture and way of doing things. Where I'm from, up in the Great Plains, then they wanted our buffalo, and so they hunted the buffalo nearly to extinction. And they wanted more land, so they took our children and they put them in boarding schools. And when they put them in boarding schools, they took our language, cut our hair, took our foods away, separated us from our families, and separated us from the everyday experiences of our culture and our spiritual practices, and then also took away the larger ceremonial practices. Our children were not able to attend those. And in fact, we know that in many places it was illegal for Native Americans to practice their religion here in the United States. And it was actually weaponized against us. I have my own family talked about being persecuted for practicing our religious beliefs, treaty rations withheld, and other kinds of retaliation. Those things took place. We all got those stories. And of course, it took an act of Congress to finally see that Native Americans could freely practice their religions. But I think as we've seen with the boarding school initiative that's been mentioned so many times, the work of correcting past historical wrongs is not over. It's probably not going to be over in a generation or even 2 or 3 generations. Every generation has an opportunity to move things forward and to get a little bit better. And it's important that each of us step up and do our part, the best that we can, to advance, to reclaim what was taken, and to heal so that the generation that comes next doesn't have to kind of deal with some of the problems that we had, some of the challenges. I had a law school professor And he said, my job is to go throw myself on the barbed wire fence. And then you crawl over me and you throw yourself on the next barbed wire fence so that whoever's behind you can crawl over you. And that's what we have to do as Indigenous people. It took hundreds of years to get here, and it's going to take hundreds of years to get back to where we are. It can sound a little bit somber and down, but at the same time, I think it's really also very important that we always continue to realize that our best days are not behind us, but in front of us. That we not get stuck in the past, and that we keep our eye forward, and that we keep our eye on the horizon, and that we keep moving forward. And so, as we think about those opportunities around co-stewardship, around Indigenous knowledge, around conservation, around protecting sacred sites, I think there's a lot of tremendous opportunity. And I'm excited to think about those and to continue to work with leaders like yourselves on finding and identifying ways that we can do that for the benefit of all of our children. And I'll cut it off here, but I just want to also say thank you to each and every one of you for being here, for your work on advancing these issues, and also for reminding us and continuing to remind us that as Indigenous people, it begins and ends with prayer. That's something that's always been drilled into us. And so with that, look forward to learning and hearing more about this work, and hope that everyone has a good and excellent, productive week. So, thank you.
We're going to go ahead and turn the live streaming off. And we're going to try tomorrow through the Senate Rules Committee to have it live streamed as well. But we're going to turn it off at this time. And